Welcome to the Fulfillment Game. Here we have meaningful conversations with extraordinary professionals exploring life, work, and their personal spiritual wisdom in a context grounded in contribution. I'm your host, Amit Sood. Today we have Traci Arends. Traci found her answers in Ignatian Spirituality. She's a spiritual director and founder of She, Fully Alive. As an educator, Traci works in women's integrated health, empowering transformation. In this conversation, Traci shares what the journey of freedom looks like. She talks about a series of ideas and topics that facilitate spiritual transformation. This has been one of the most powerful conversations for me, so I hope you will find it useful too. Stay tuned. So, welcome, Traci. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me, Amit. I'm so glad to be here.
Traci, tell us your story. Do share your journey of becoming a spiritual director. Tell us about Ignatian Spirituality. How did you discover it and how
Sure.
does it transform?
Yeah, thank you. I grew up in a very, I would say, fundamentalist background,
Mm.
um, and in a single parent home. And so I had adopted this very conservative religious background, and as I moved through life, I went through a really difficult season, and I found myself feeling lost, and I didn't fit within the confines of that religious tradition that I had always been a part of my life. And so um, I began seeking, and one of the things that was recommended to me was, have you ever considered seeing a spiritual director? And so I really had left the church and for about 10 years, and still knowing awareness of in my religious tradition my need to have a relationship with God, but I was struggling with the religious framework. And so I did go ahead and begin to see a spiritual director, and she just challenged my tendency to want to perform, more of a performative religion, and faith. And so she said, we're human beings, not human doings.
Mm.
And so that started in that space of quiet and presence. I began to unpack what I had known. And it was a very slow process. And after a few years, she said, have you thought about becoming a spiritual director?
Mm.
And I thought about it. My mom had always been very ill and kind of struggled with depression, and she had become very ill about in the same season, and I became her caregiver for a time. So I put it off again and waited. But I'm glad that I did, because I think I needed to be really ready to move into it and cultivate the spaces that I needed to cultivate to be transformed. And so, but then I eventually did enter the program, and it was a 3-year program rooted in Ignatian spirituality. Talk a little bit about that. Part of the 3 years in the program was a couple of years of kind of academic learning, although they weren't grades. It was all based on critical reflection and where's the spirit moving within you? How are you responding to that? And then in addition to that, then there was a year of supervision when we saw directees as we prepared. But the kind of the assessments were reflective in nature. We called them student progress dialogues, and it was very intimate with faculty. And then we also needed to do on our own the extended Ignatian exercises, which Ignatius of Loyola was, he was known for being a womanizer when he was young. And he was, this is, like 1700s, he was in a battle, and he was hit with a cannonball, and he had a very long recovery. It took his leg. And so he would read literature, and he would read sacred texts, and he would feel better, he noticed, and he would read the other books, like kind of romance type novels of the time, and he would not feel settled in his soul. And just with this major thing that happened to him, which is often what happens with transformation, there's something that there's a block of something, a big issue, a large issue that materializes, and then we start to get curious on how do I make sense of my world? And so that's what he went through. And so over time, he developed what originally was a 30-day Ignatian exercises, where it's 30-day retreat of prayer and silence. And it's really about communing with, for him, it was God, but with spirit. And in this 30-day, and understanding being loved, and that there is this higher power walking alongside you. And over time, because people couldn't do the 30-day, it's turned into about a 10-month process of an hour of prayer daily at least, and then following sacred texts, not all from Christianity, and then really looking inward and doing inner work, and meeting with the spiritual director weekly for that entire time. So part of that program that I went through also, that was required outside of the normal curriculum and supervision. And so over the course of time, what Ignatian Spirituality, it asks you to look at how you make decisions. It's called discernment, right? And so, and to hold loosely, live from a place of indifference. And that isn't a place of complacency. It's a place of relinquishing control. And then, in the decision making, don't make decisions when you're in desolation. That's feeling far from God. And make decisions when you're in consolation, when you're feeling closer to God. That's a better time to make like major decisions. And so that means that you just take time. It creates a less reactive spirit and a more responsive one. And also another piece of it was community. There's a large community in Ignatian Spirituality, but it's not just, it's very open to other faith traditions, and appreciates the beauty in the other traditions, in any tradition, if it's Buddhism, Hinduism, and whatever that is, Sufi. So that ultimately was the program. It completely transformed my life and the space that I lived out of, and the probably the anxiousness that used to be very pervasive for me in my life. And so much so I ended up then moving forward and decided to pursue my PhD, because I wanted to share this. I knew the healing that I had received in walking through it, and I developed a spiritual direction practice, but then I also went on to get my PhD and really look at how the program was structured, that created the transformation, because I saw it across the community. It's just a really special place in the world that we live in today. And so, and there's just a kinship. And so I did do that, and I identified, the conditions that are created in that space, in that formation program, and in that, in Ignatian Spirituality, that really lead people to transformation and to live whole and full lives, and be able to move through grief, and and examine what role do I play in my own suffering, where am I getting in my own way, and things like that. And so I then moved into that research, and researched people for a 10-year window, and it was incredible, the results that I found. So, and that's how I kind of landed today. So
thanks for sharing, Traci. I could think of a million questions as you were talking about it. Let's begin with the beginning. You spoke a little bit about a period of, you spoke about a difficult season.
yeah.
And you put it really beautifully. And how important is a phase of difficulty in a journey of transformation? Now that you've spoken to so many people through your research and through your own journey, I felt that it appears to be a pattern. It definitely is there. What is your feeling as far as this difficult season is concerned.
Yeah, I believe that it is too. I mean, from a theoretical perspective, there are certain conditions that have to be in place for transformation to happen. And I guess one thing I didn't say in the curriculum is that a requirement is that people have a learner's stance, a
Mm.
learner's stance being open to ideas that they may not have, to types of people, to to thoughts, to material that they may have never been exposed to before, and where we might want to stay comfortable in our little spaces. And part of being open, I have found, and it's a part that's necessary for transformation, is what I would call a disorienting dilemma, something that surfaces in a person's life that is that's just really disruptive. If it's a loss, if it's a job loss, if it's the loss of a marriage, the death of a dream, whatever that is, um, it- you know, um, spouse leaving, children that are, maybe engaging in some things that we never thought would happen, or, whatever it is, that openness is critical in order for transformation to take hold. And so the disorienting dilemma will happen. And then there's just this period of, this is when I'm like wandering in the desert, of just how do I make sense of this? And then with an openness, and then taking in, doing the critical reflection, we have to go inward, and then being guided through, I would say, knowledge acquisition, learning about these different, if it's faith traditions, perspectives, um, you know, we have to take in new knowledge in order to replace the same tape that we've been playing in our heads
Mm.
since childhood. Childhood has a huge impact on where we land in our perspectives, and so and yeah, and so we need that knowledge acquisition, and then we need to reintegrate our new perspective based on our critical reflection and that knowledge reintegration, and we need to do it in a supportive community. That's really the most powerful environment to do it, to engage in transformation. The transformation is individual, but that supportive community is really helpful on that journey as well. And
Mm.
so that, to be more concise, the disorienting dilemma, there's this openness, there's critical reflection, going inward, and then knowledge acquisition and knowledge reintegration into new normal and new world view would be how I would frame it. And it's just really powerful when done in a safe and supportive community that invites that openness and vulnerability
Mm.
to be able to engage in that process. And it's ongoing. We're always called to something higher,
Yeah.
right? And so yeah, and some people won't choose that. Many people won't choose that, but it's it's just a beautiful thing to experience and to watch other people experience, the transformation. And in my research, every single person that I interviewed used the word expansiveness. Every single person. I didn't say anything to them. They were interviewed separately, and it just expanded their worldview and the lens through which they saw the world.
Mm.
And it really fostered love, in them and through them.
Yeah. Wow. Beautiful. You practically generate a journey of transformation by sharing about it. Um, so there is an element of discerning dilemma, and and you spoke about critical reflection that follows, and how you articulated it is uh, really beautiful. To reflect where the spirit is moving in me, how the spirit is moving me. So, could you say something a little bit more about that for people of for people who do not have the vocabulary spirit?
Sure.
Yeah.
Um,
So,
yeah, I mean, spirit for me is God, but belief in something beyond yourself. I mean, we can go academic and look at the research and see how much spirituality is important in our well-being, and a belief beyond something beyond ourselves. Fetzer Institute has some excellent material that you can click on and walk through spirituality and how it's transformed over years. And quite frankly, it's moved away from the church, but moved, more into more of a mainstream spirituality, not necessarily tied to, my apologies, 1 second here.
No,
Sorry, Amit.
no problem. No problem at all.
Good now.
No problem.
Okay.
No problem.
I wasn't expecting that right now. So, but
Yeah,
yeah, we're talking about beyond. And so I would say,
to see its movement within us is what you spoke about. It's such a beautiful articulation that I wanted more about as well. So how does
yes. I think it's a somatic experience.
Mm,
I think we're rushing a lot, so we might not pay attention to that.
mm,
So that notion that we slow down and we develop practices consistently so that we can hear that and feel that. And so when I'm engaging in a space or with people, or I'm processing through a situation I'm facing into, a relationship, whatever that is, just to take a minute and go, what is that? Because that's guidance, right? That's information and guidance from the spirit to what am I feeling in my body? And what's the root of that? And so taking the time to slow so that if the spirit speaks to us through our bodies or through thoughts, and guidance, we can hear it, and it can help inform shifting patterns and healing spaces and setting boundaries and all the things that help us to live fuller lives rooted in love, really, and even questioning, where we might make decisions that hurt other people, and what is that, and getting curious about it, and allowing the spirit to just let those things surface, maybe things that have driven us to do things, say things, remain in situations that really aren't serving us, so
mm.
yeah.
So would you say to slow down and to reflect on say a sense a somatic experience of something that shows up as um, to oneself personally in a matter of either beauty or an inner invocation of some sort, or a movement that one senses which one can't explain always, and one often overlooks and goes forward beyond. But this is an invitation to pause
It's,
and to pay attention, and then to see if we can articulate what is, or reflect on it. Say more about it.
yeah, an invitation, exactly. I love that word, and it's an invitation to nurture in us wholeness, I think.
Mm,
um that's the spirit's desire for us to be whole, and yeah, to just sit with that, and then, again, always called to something higher, so we get through that, and we we move forward, and then we'll have something else. But we're just building these skills over time of listening to the spirit, trusting in the spirit. Um, and it allows us, I think it creates a confidence in us, not in an egotistical way, but
mm,
in a way that gives us an inner calm,
mm,
and part of Ignatian spirituality is discernment, and discernment is in the decision making process, and just to know that I don't have to make that decision right now. I need to sit with this. I want to be responsive versus reactive, um, and that knowledge of the spirit guiding, and trusting in that again, um, is powerful in helping us to not operate out of a space of fear and anxiety, and make decisions and choices and that might be harmful, and also to be gentle and extend grace to ourselves. We don't have to get it right all the time. There's freedom in that too, and freedom is really just this journey. That's where we're going, a journey to freedom, to really show up in the world as our authentic selves, and be loved in the midst of that. And
And such beautiful words. Discernment. When you spoke about discernment, and you, in the context of decision making, you used an extraordinary word from my point of view, which was see if you can permit some indifference. Indifference, and you did speak about, say, relinquishing control, um, etc. Kind of a surrender. But I'm really curious about, and it's a way, and it did generate something very beautiful. The use of the word indifference, deliberate indifference, as if we are permitting a little indifference as we are in the poised to make a decision. So say more about
Yeah,
discernment.
sure. I think yeah, the indifference could present in the word, as complacent, but it truly is not. It's indifference is really an invitation to respond to situations with hold. In Ignatian spirituality, we say holding loosely.
Hmm.
Like we're not controlling outcomes. We realize what we can control is within ourselves, and outcomes beyond us we hold loosely. So that's what that indifference is. It's not a complacency. It's a taking a deep breath when I start to feel something inside, and just go and just breathe through it, and allow things to transpire, and make the best decisions for ourselves within that, but not holding controlling to the outcomes. Uh,
This
yeah.
is this is so. This vocabulary is also very similar to one that emerges from Zen, uh,
Okay. Yeah.
holding loosely, and it's a reflection on what are you holding, what are you holding at this moment, and so can you loosen that a little bit more? So what are you holding again? It's as if an invitation to relinquish, as you say, control or grasp. What are you grasping? Those are the words that the Zen philosophy uses as well.
It's yes, it's this loss of the sense of urgency
Hmm.
over, what I think needs to happen.
Hmm.
Um, and a freedom to allow what happens, and respond in the midst of that, versus reacting and controlling, and tying myself up in knots, and and quite frankly, you can't pause and think if you're you know tied
Yeah.
up in knots like that. And so they're really, it might be a really, we all have our areas. Like I said, we're always called to something higher. We get, the thing that used to be really hard for me 15 years ago might not be hard for me anymore, but that doesn't mean there isn't going to be something much more difficult, coming. And yet to pause in that moment, because I'm cultivating those practices, and say, okay,
Hmm.
we're going to be okay, you know, and yeah, so it's so helpful. And then just to know that another piece in the discernment is consolation and desolation. And consolations in Ignatian spirituality is um, times when we're feeling close to the divine or to God, and then desolations are times when we're feeling far apart. And so Ignatian spirituality would say, if we're faced with a decision and we're operating out of a place of desolation, we would want to wait and not make a decision in that moment. And so it just gives us, we like to have a framework for our finite minds, and it's helpful. It's still, we still have a lot of agency in the midst of it, but it's helpful to recognize, again, because we're cultivating those practices, you know okay, what's happening in me right now, and I need to wait, or I can move forward, and just this self-awareness that's so critical as we walk through life. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. MIT has Otto Schermer has done some interesting work on something that he calls presencing, and he talks about an idea of um, sensing. So as if it's an idea which one is invited to pause, um, become a little more still and silent, and then to wait. And then instead of using a perception tool which is more mind driven, say logical thinking or listening for something in particular that wants to rise um, linearly, the invitation is to sense what wants to happen, what is the future that's emerging, non-linearly, you know. It's like
Yeah,
an
beautiful.
hmm?
Yeah.
Yeah,
When
that's
I hear that,
yeah.
I think of I'm going to hike the Inca Trail in Machu Picchu in August. And
Hmm.
I've been watching, like I was when I first started looking into this, I hiked from southern France across Spain a few years ago by myself, and I'm doing this one by myself as well. And I just take it as retreat time, you know. That's a retreat. That's a practice for me, going on retreats. I don't always go to Machu Picchu, but um,
It's a
and
retreat. Is it a retreat?
I mean, I'll use it as a pilgrimage.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, I'll use it as a pilgrimage. That's what my other, but yeah. And so as I've been on this journey of discerning, should I do this, should I not, I'm paying attention, right? And so I've seen all of these spaces in my life where this hike has surfaced, and
Hmm.
I'm just like, oh, there it is again, you know. Oh, it's coming up for me again, and I was leading it's called the sacred circle, where we come together and do circle work, and it came up again in that, and I just was, yes, I'm going. As I was discerning, and it was not a, like you said, yeah, there's just some sensing going on, right? And paying attention in the midst of that, and waiting, and yeah, it's,
And
it's
you're
beautiful.
prompting something else to lead you in.
Yes,
You know?
yes, yeah, that's great. Yeah,
Uh,
love that.
it's beautiful. The vocabulary of the Ignatian spirituality itself is quite beautiful. And of course, it shows up in so many contexts. But let's talk about expansiveness, this thing that you spoke about.
Yeah, that is the word, like I said, that every single person in my research had come up with, when they describe the difference in themselves, and the difference that the program made in their lives. And again, it wouldn't have to be Ignatian spirituality, but conceptually, um, how we navigate transformation, and and that expansiveness for them, and for myself included, is just this worldview that sees people. I mean, I guess in Christian tradition, you would say has Jesus's eyes for people. That this loving space that we operate out of, with on how we see people, all cultures, all, are you familiar with Valerie Carr's work, Revolutionary Love?
I say
Okay.
something about it. Say,
Yeah, she talks about, in her book, it's her memoir, and she talks about um, September 11th, and how she's how people that looked like her, she's her background is Sufi religion. She grew up in California, but the people that looked like her on September 11th, what's written about is how we came together as a nation, and what happened for certain pockets of the population was that they were treated horribly. And that's one of the spaces. So when I talk about, it just removes color barriers. It appreciates people as human beings, and I think that's the transformation that people, and even like it brings people together into a program that I would never have met. I would have never, I had nothing in common with anybody there, and that's the expansiveness, from all different faith traditions, all different, sexual orientations, all different, and it's just such a unique space. And so, and yet it created this safe container of, we started with boundaries work, where with people would share something, all we could say was thank you. That was first semester. And it was really hard because you wanted to say more, but they were intentional about creating the space that was safe for people to be vulnerable, and not saying a lot, and so you were allowed to appreciate people for who they were and really get to know who they are with without having blinders on, that allowed for judgment. And it's really rooted in being non-judgmental. And that's where that expansiveness comes out of. And then exposure to the mystics and different faith traditions and different journeys of faith. Like for me, we do a book in there called Faith Styles, and you learn about um, people that, like for me, I grew up in this fundamentalist tradition, then I left, then I did this deconstruction and reconstruction, and it kind of helps um, make meaning out of an individual story that I felt was just kind of messy, and so that expansiveness through that, through the exposure to that was cultivated in that program in just so many ways, from cultures to religions to perspectives, and then connection and safe community, but that's the expansiveness through having all of those pieces together that people completed. And I spoke to one woman who was in the program 20 years ago, and she said, Traci, it ruined me for normal conversation because she just wanted, there's just a tendency to go deeper. And I think we're longing for that. We just don't get the spaces to do it,
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, indeed. And so at the deep end, consolation, consolation. Am I using the word right?
Consolation and desolation.
Yes. So the proximity to God.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, how has this, as an idea, as a felt experience, transformed for you as you have spent years through this journey?
Yeah.
How it began for you and how it has brought you to, where has it brought you today?
Yeah. Thank you. I think it's helped me to be really honest with myself, and it increased my awareness. I guess I'll use kind of a practical example. Um, if I have a relationship with someone, are you familiar with the Enneagram, Amit?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm a 2 on the Enneagram.
Hmm.
Okay. So for me, I would want to be a helper, right? I'd want to help, help, help. So, but I can help too much, and I'm actually I run the risk of a couple of things: becoming somewhat possessive over the outcome, and also overextending myself, right? So now, because of like in consolation and desolation, if I am faced with um, a decision I need to make around how I'm going to show up for someone in need, um, and I have to ask myself, if I'm in consolation or desolation, is this rooted in, and it's kind of back to the sensing that you were talking about, right?
Hmm.
Is this rooted in me needing validation? Am I wanting to move forward to be this helper, um, out of a space of a need for validation for me, or out of love? And so where am I at? It just helps me to question what's driving my behavior, and then make the appropriate decisions. And that might mean that I, if I'm in desolation, I need to not do it at that point. And I need to sit with it and maybe get curious about why I'm in desolation. Why am I, where am I feeling not enough or inadequate? Um, you know, uh, and conversely, um, I also get to operate out of a space of wonder and awe and love. And so if I'm I'm going to lunch with my daughter-in-law today, and I can't wait. And it has nothing to do with me needing validation. I just get to make this memory today,
Hmm.
and I'm operating out of a space of love, um and that's different than feeling obligated or like I have to do it in order to be okay. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yeah,
Yeah.
it does. And and God as an idea for you, how has that um, evolved?
Yeah, I mean, the ability to be present helps me to see where God, for one, I think I would recommend for everyone to do a spiritual journey reflection, to look back at your spiritual journey on how has God shown up throughout your story. Um, and also be gentle with yourself and do it slowly and revisit it because it can be really a lot. Because there can be hard things in there too. If anytime we're looking back, I say, I was in some training with the Center for Mind Body Medicine, and there was one gentleman in the training that said, I'm going to look back, but I'm not going to stare. And I thought that was really insightful. But anyway, the spiritual journey, I would say, um, in terms of now, I think as a result of going through the extended Ignatian exercises, I have so much that really healed my relationship with my lens toward God, and where I saw God before as very punitive, um, rule oriented, shame based,
Mm.
completely counter to who I believe God is. And so now, because I have these new eyes, what I would say, then I can say, I'm in this garden and these flowers are absolutely beautiful. And I can be really present in that and then actually sit in that. And I can even feel it right now, just that knowledge of I am so loved, and so that is how it's shifted. I don't have that lens anymore of, oh, I can't do that, or what will people think, or do I ever have to kind of battle with that? Sure, because I'm human, but overarchingly, and by cultivating the presence, my awareness around God's goodness in my story and in my spaces, is it's so life-giving, you know. Um, I grew up in Montana. I was just back there, flew back on Sunday, and that was my childhood home. And I was very present and conscious in that, of like spaces that have been hard in that journey, when I look back at my past. And also really, um, I always think about it when I go there and just want to make sure that I'm healing everything up as I go. I just being present and going, wow, I remember this, and it's just so beautiful. So, um, I think, yeah, that presence for me with God, and the love that I sense and feel in the core of my being, by doing that work to heal my previous view of God, that's what it took for me to have awareness of who God truly is for me, which is rooted in love. So, yeah.
Yeah. Mm. And then transformation. Um, to me, it seems like an unfolding. As you're describing it, it's as if there is easing into something, as if a little bit of giving up of resistance that appears to be transformation rather than something else. Say a little bit about your perception and your personal experience. Say, what is transformation?
Yeah, I do think it's a surrender, um, surrender of control, but not in a way that is limiting. It's actually freeing. So yeah, it just it removes any notion of um, competition or competing. Freedom is the best word I can think of to describe what transformation looks like, a shedding of the ways that I limit myself, uh, and then a shedding of a need for control, um, and a way to walk freely, um, of loving people freely, of not having reservations about engaging with people. I mean, I see a lot of people, um, that are at different points in the journey, and I can see them holding themselves back. And not because I'm judging them, but because I've already done that. I've held myself back. I've been my own worst enemy, or, I've gotten in the way of what I could have become. And so I'm not judging them. I just know that, and part of it for me is in spiritual direction too. I think sometimes I get people coming that want me to tell them what to do. And that's not uncommon. And I mean, I wish people, it's just hard to sit and make our own decisions and trust in our inner knowing. And so, but that's a really important part of the journey. And I don't want to interfere with their ability to experience that transformation by interfering with their inner knowing and them listening to the spirit. And so I guess the transformation is a journey toward freedom. It's ongoing. And it's definitely an individual journey, even in the midst of being accompanied, if it's by, you do the deep coaching or spiritual director. It's a personal decision, and it requires an openness, like I talked about before, and a willingness to pay attention and do the work, which is hard. So
What is the hard part?
it's not, well, I think when we can get access to everything on our phone in about 10 seconds, and this transformation takes it's literally,
Yeah.
it's a lifelong journey. But even, so we want instant gratification, and we don't want to feel the way we feel about things sometimes, and it just takes time. And so it's, so I would say don't be discouraged, but it's not a fast process. Even students that I was just in a committee meeting last night where we were talking about this program, because I teach in the program that I research. So we were talking about people making decisions to enter into the program. And the thing we left with was, it's a discernment process. It doesn't happen overnight, so it takes time. When we're making decisions around transformation and then waiting for that transformation to occur, we can have moments where, like, I think, near-death experiences or disorienting dilemmas, where we know that we need to do something differently, but it still takes time, so.
When I hear of transformation as a word, the literal meaning, and the metaphors that are occasionally invoked as well. And there's great beauty in these metaphors. Say, for example, the one of caterpillar becoming a butterfly. It's,
Yeah.
from one to the other. And there's great evolution involved as well. But to me, it also, when listening to you, more through listening to you, I'm brought to appreciate that transformation is not from here to here. It's not a shift. It's as if from here to an opening.
Yeah.
And so it's as if stay open and watch. I watch it continue to unfold. Watch. So does that resonate as an idea that transformation is less about, say, the butterfly that it became, and more about, okay, watch what it is becoming, say something.
Yeah, I agree with that. 100%. I do think also, I do think it's an unfolding. And I think also it's really helpful in that unfolding if we're paying attention to the small wins, if you will,
Yeah.
so that we continue to see, look what's happening here, and because the awe and the wonder is really, and play. That's another piece I guess I would talk about. We haven't really talked about that, but
Play.
creativity and play. If those two things are part of my life, I'm moving in a good direction. They're really important, and so yes, I think that it is very much an unfolding and an awareness in the midst of that unfolding of the spaces that have been healed, the parts of us that are becoming, and where we see that happening, because it's, and I think journaling can be really powerful for that, so that we're keeping track. I ask that question a lot. Are you writing about this? Also narrative writing, just in general histories, but but yeah, I agree. It's an unfolding and we're always called to something higher. And it's just good to take an inventory sometimes and go, wow, let's look back at this journey. And it's beautiful. So, and then show up with gratitude in that.
Hmm. It's as if, the next is remains relatively less or poorly defined, and that's the beauty of it, not in a fashion in which it is critical. The transformation into doesn't look like, okay, an arrival. It looks more like
Yes.
a suspension of, as if a leap into uh, possibility, potentiality, which is so open that you don't put a finger on it, and yet you sense it, you are present to it, you're moved by it, uh, you're dissolved into it.
Yeah. And I
You're,
think too, there are layers to it, I would say, you know, and that openness to awe and wonder allows me to move into something that I didn't anticipate. I didn't, it's nothing better than seeing where the spirit shows up and brings things together as only the spirit can. And I get to be the benefactor, and so I'm doing my work. I'm being present.
mm,
I'm reflecting. I'm, learning. I'm loving. And in the midst of that, there's this beauty that emerges. But yeah, I don't think we arrive. And I think it's layered, and there are things that maybe need to be exposed that we don't have awareness of, and we just continue to, as we commit to transformation and remain open, it gives us opportunities to see these invitations that come to us. Um, and that's beautiful.
and as one is paying into transformation, some thoughts around, Tracy. There's something which one needs to sift through. I meant like clarify, so that one discovers what something, the essence that one grounds oneself into. So here is the question. It's easy to lose one's bearing, one's grounding, as one is progressing into the ephemeral, as if this elevated sense of openness, to become a romantic and not to, to live free and loose, rather than to live grounded and determined,
Yeah,
and to have some bearing in life. What
yeah,
does one ground oneself into through this journey?
yeah. I mean, I think because of the nature of the world that we live in, we need to constantly be grounding ourselves. Um, I mean, in terms of work that's always available, I would say breath work is always something that can ground us, um, your faith tradition, whatever that is. Are you speaking, Amit, towards spaces that ground you, or core beliefs that ground you? Um,
I'm still completely with you in the journey. So I'm thinking of the essence. Uh, and I'm talking, your sharing is transforming me as I'm listening to you. As I'm
yeah,
listening, I'm traveling with you through the journey of, say, for
yeah,
example, openness. You spoke about then critical reflection, and paying attention as there is some expansiveness showing up, and consolation versus desolation, and letting go
yeah,
of, the surety, and taking a leap into what wants to happen, and sensing it, becoming really letting go of the familiar uh, into what
yeah,
is calling,
yeah,
the beauty of what is calling. And yeah, go on.
yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I'd say too, one thing I haven't talked about in Ignatian spirituality is there's the practice of the examen.
Hmm.
And that's where you would actually, it's a daily practice. There's a daily examen app these days, but where you would record your consolations and desolations for your day. And it's a way of kind of taking stock in your day. But also another practice that I recommend that I think is really powerful to your grounding point would be um, an end of year examen. I always take, depending on what year you operate on, I always take the time between Christmas and New Year's and go away for quiet retreat time. And I do an end of year examen, and I look back at my prior year's examen, and that's has to do with more significant events, right? And places where I saw the spirit move throughout my year, and what are my values, and what anchors me. And then and so instead of making a bunch of resolutions for the year ahead, like people often do, I look back at that the year prior and take stock of the year and see where the movements of the spirit have been occurring. And then that gives me kind of insights into, you know, what this time before me might look like. Because then that's my time to slow and really be present in, where a daily examen, I might be talking about, I just really enjoyed lunch with my daughter-in-law today. And whereas the annual examen that I do during that retreat time really looks at, connectedness to the spirit in spaces. If it was with a directee, if it was, with being part of a movement that was meaningful, or being part of something that was really difficult, like we had, where in the area where I live, the Operation Metro Surge was devastating here, and that's something that'll be on the examen. That was, and so for this next year. But yeah, so I do that annual exam, and it really helps to ground me into what matters to me, and where I think the spirit is moving.
I get it. And in the tradition that I'm from,
Yeah.
um, there is a felt experience in the body of self as realization of one's own divinity or union with divinity begins with a certain amount of literary understanding as the beginning, at the lowest energy center, which is as if, okay, I am clear. As far as knowing is concerned, I'm willing to establish myself in that clarity. And now I'm ready to discover what does it change as a life. And from there, the energy of life itself or experience of life itself shifts as one rises through one's body into different experiences. At the level or the center too, it's about being open to emotions and being moved by the emotional experience of union with divinity, or to discover the evidence of divinity in the lived life, being willing, how what it causes in the emotional world. That's the second level, the energy center too. And the third center is more about action and will and
Okay.
self redefinition. And the fourth is about love and self expression as love. It's about service, getting out of the way and becoming authentic. And, uh, you know, so I'm talking a little bit about the system through which one is actually transforming through the energy centers, as chakras, as they're called.
Yes,
And,
yes.
and one ultimately is transforming towards a total and complete abstraction of oneself into divinity. That means one is fully present to um, a complete experience of an open experience of divinity in a fashion in which the mind is not coming in the way of the experience. And having experienced it as, into that elevated sense, one begins to descend backwards. And now the experience of having been in an abstracted divinity, transformed experience, as we were speaking about, begins to transform relatedness. It transforms, you know what I mean? And ultimately,
Yeah.
one again establishes oneself in grounded experience of living a life which is practical, and yet with the realization that of unity itself. That's
Hmm.
actually the metaphor with which the Indian spirituality works on this chapter.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, that's beautiful. It's like, and how it maybe perhaps reflects is even like the energy you bring into a room.
It's as if
Which,
when we are present to love, there is a certain part of the body where we're the self is operating from, and we are breathing from. So as if we are more present in the heart location. And when one is present to the transformation, the self transformation, or will, or making something happen from that point of view, not in a bad way, but at the same time driving will, uh, having discovered this is what is to be done. Say, for example, one is discovering consolence and then consolation, and then one has discovered that this is what is, and now there is great enthusiasm
Yes.
and liberated action which wants to happen. And at that point of time, one is operating in a different center of operation within the body. So, and that is a vertical, and our journey appears to be fully connected from top to bottom and to free up this channel, which is the journey of healing and transformation of, overcoming one's own inhibitions and hesitations and doubts and
Yeah,
empowering
love
oneself
that.
a bit more.
It's probably more like what I'm attaching to freedom of
Yeah,
just
yeah,
really, yeah, the whole self. Just, yeah,
yeah. It's as if,
beautiful.
as if also a physical manifestation of it. You know what I mean? That I just
Yeah.
felt inclined to share. But I'm really curious about creativity and play. You spoke a little bit about. So how does one show? In a mundane life, definitely I get what creativity is. Here, how would you distinguish creativity from creativity? Um, we are not talking about just creativity, but we are talking about something. How would you define it?
Yeah, I think even, if one of the things we do in the program that I teach in is just bring in ways for people to be creative. And seriously, well, one of the things, we had a virtual environment for one day, and we asked them to create an image or an artifact of their spiritual journey.
Hmm.
And so they engaged in what I would say creativity and play. And, one person used the metaphor of making bread and all the steps in making bread. And it was so interesting. Another person went to an art gallery and took an image of a statue there and pose that statue in different ways to illustrate their spiritual journey. Another person used an image that they created, and so that's really important to help us process at a deep level in a meaningful way. And the creativity, if that can be present, is an indicator, just a lightness of mind, of yeah, it's to me evidence of a removal of heaviness, and it's part of freedom in the play and we don't access those play spaces if it's just being playful and silly or going to comedy or what, as much as we should, as like a center for joy.
Hmm.
And so those are two elements, I think, in our well-being that are important to access and be intentional about.
And could you say something, a few words about play as well? I get the creativity bit a little bit, and
Yeah.
help me here.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, just a playfulness about, even how would I play? I mean, I have a puppy, and just even I take time to be just playful and not just, it's for me. I mean, you know, um, and to experience it, it just allows for some wonder and cuts the seriousness and um, the rigor that we often are engaging in our everyday life. If it's, you know, I'm not a video game person. I don't even know if I would consider that play, but if it's bocce ball or just whatever you consider playful, whatever speaks to you in a
Mm.
creative space,
And
I think
generate
it's helpful.
lightness, as if, I mean, operate from lightness to lightness.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So for people who would be interested in finding out more and say something about how does one begin? Where does one begin? And what to expect when one begins?
Is this about spiritual direction or
Yes, and the
okay?
experiences that you've spoken about, it could be
Yeah.
spiritual direction and
Yeah, so I think Spiritual Directors International is a great organization, and They have bios. They have many class opportunities. They have bios where you can connect with spiritual directors on their website. But they also have a lot of learning opportunities where you can learn about different faiths, different practices, just a wealth of information. So I would recommend that. I have a company called She Fully Alive that is rooted in women's integrated health. And through that, I offer spiritual direction and a series of workshops and courses. My website is shefullyalive.com. And also, I would say, I would start with Spiritual Directors International if you've not been exposed to spiritual direction. It's really important in spiritual direction that you find a spiritual director that is really concerned with holding your story and has proper boundaries and privacy. And it's a very vulnerable space where I think you can be, it's soul work and it's beautiful. And I would just want to make sure that, ask where they were trained or, and to make sure that's that they have the support that they need to accompany. And I think those would be a couple. The program that I teach in is at Sacred Ground Center for Spirituality. It's been in place since 1994. It's a great program.
You teach a program at the spiritual direction.
I do. I teach the formation program the first year. So.
Right.
Yeah.
And how accessible it is in terms of expense, and how what would one expect?
So Ignatian exercises, that is something that you would do separately, and we recommend taking those before you start the program. You don't have to, but it just frees you up mentally to, and that's every director is different. I would say it would be for the 10 months, maybe $1,000, and that would be out of pocket. And then the program at Sacred Ground is about $2,000 for the first year, and I think it's $1,500 for the second and $1,500 for the third. So, and there is some financial aid available, but
I get it.
Yeah. So
what did we not talk about, Traci? What do people today need to hear that that we haven't yet quite covered today?
Yeah, I think one thing, really we've talked about a lot, so I don't want to overwhelm people, but just to be hopeful in a space that, if you're feeling lost in your journey or you don't know if this is for you, or you can see yourself in our dialogue around, freedom and maybe unfreedom. I would just say that we're incredibly resilient and we can live full and whole lives. And that's why I do this work, because I want people to know that. And so just to be open, I would encourage people to be open, because no matter what you think is in your story that will never be okay can be healed. And a lot of times things that surface in our stories we have no control over. But it's not helpful if we live out of a space of victimhood either. So there are resources out there to bring the healing that you've been longing for. And so I would encourage you to do that for yourself and for everyone around you. And then also I would say that sometimes that can be hard in that when we start to make changes and people around us don't, that can be hard too, but stay the course, because you matter. And I appreciate you asking that, but I think we've covered quite a bit. So.
It was really beautiful. It's been really beautiful. And if you were to give a name to today's conversation, if this was an invitation into something, what would you call this was an invitation towards, or for listeners?
Oh, wow. The journey to freedom.
Unbelievable. Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's the essence, isn't it, of this conversation?
It is. It truly is. Yeah.
Thank you. How do I thank you? It's unbelievably generous, and you didn't just share. You brought us into an experience of what your work is about, what you are about, and what it brings to people who spend a few moments with you. I see this is really, really beautiful.
Thank you so much, Amit. Likewise, really appreciate your work.
Thank you so much. And for people who are listening, this is an invitation to pause, to slow down, to pay attention. Hope you've picked up something that would help you be somebody, the one that you would truly honor, the real you. So until next time, take care, stay connected, switch from strife to the fulfillment game. Don't forget to like and follow for more such conversations. Thank you so much.
Thank you.